Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast, where we explore health, wellness, performance, and try to improve not only your quantity of life, but your quality of life. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman.
Hi everyone, today's guest is Dr. Joe Lenac, who is a clinical psychologist as well as a sports psychologist. So we all know how important the physical training, the weightlifting, the running, the practicing is for our athletes. But the mental side is a huge component and is often what's either going to hold athletes back or help supercharge them and lift and elevate them to a new level. So I am excited to talk to Dr. Lenac today. I know he's going to give us some practical and applicable activities and drills to do to help us all be not only healthier, but to boost our performance. So Dr. Lenac, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me to your show and getting to know you more as well, and and share with people our world of sports is a great thing. So my background is I went to St. Louis University for my undergrad degree and did a degree in psychology, and then went to SIU Edwardsville and finished a master's in clinical psychology. And then from SIU, I obtained my license. At that time, you could get a license with a master's degree in the state of Missouri. And then I had to do a 3-year, 4,500-hour internship to get the license. Nice. So I had a lot of supervision. Got my license and started working, and I worked at that time directly as a clinical psychologist, doing a lot of educational testing, interfacing with schools and universities, helping students learn better and learn with different strategies, and seeing how I could work with them. And that included working at a lot of different private schools over time in the St. Louis area, which was really fun. And then in the back of my mind, though, I always had this idea I would love to do sports psychology. And that's because when I was an athlete in high school, I attended the track and field camps at the University of Illinois. And this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And they would take us after our morning runs, and we'd do these things like on relaxation. They talk about race planning and these different things. And it's like, they didn't tell us it was sports psychology because it didn't really have a name at that point. That was where it was beginning at the University of Illinois. And I got into college, in grad school, and stumbled across a sports psychology textbook in grad school. And I'm like, that's what we were doing at the University of Illinois way back when. And then it stimulated me to say, oh, I'd like to add that to my practice. I'd like to learn how to do that. So I then later on, after licensure, I went to the San Diego University of Integrated Studies out in San Diego and did a PhD program in sport and performance. And I chose that program because they had some really good professors at the time. The woman she was directing the mental health services for the NBA. Two of the trainers for the Olympic programs out in San Diego were professors. So I got a lot of really good content from folks that were already knee deep, in the industry. So that was my background in that way of coming to sport.
Okay. And then, so how many years have you? Did I see on the website? Is it 18 years that Winning Edge has been operating? Or?
I've been working full time in mental health since 1989.
Okay.
And I've been working in private practice since 95. So it's been quite a while.
Feel free to kind of take this question in any direction that you really like. But with all that time in the industry, and you've kind of carved out this specialty in the space of sports psychology, can you kind of tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the athletes or the background, so that people kind of understand the pedigree of the background that you're coming from?
In terms of working what I've done and things, and
yes, sir.
It's been for me the funnest thing to do ever.
Okay.
I never envisioned it when I was wanting to be a clinical psychologist, but I love what I do. It's a wonderful field, and one of the things I love is I've been really fortunate to work with just some phenomenal athletes. And I've loved every athlete from 9 years old to, my 68-year-old golfers to what I do. But I've been really fortunate to work for 7 years for the Rams, just like, when you were at the Rams. And that was just an amazing experience to work for an NFL team. And also, in the process, got pulled in to help create their player engagement program for the rookies. So NFL has this program that every rookie goes through during their first year about how to manage finances, emotional, relationship issues. We do all these different modules about life skills. And so that was a really just fantastic experience in getting to meet some incredible athletes and work with them directly and loved the coaching staff. That was a lot of fun. And I've been fortunate to have World Series MVP. I've had multiple medal winners in World Track and Field, in Olympic track and field, professional golfers. So a lot of really fun stuff. But one of my best stories about the Rams, we were talking about recovery. And as athletes, a really important thing is to learn the skill of recovery. So a lot of athletes don't do that well. They think, I'm going to just keep going. Coaches have given us a day off, but I'm going to still work out really hard.
Yeah.
So the Rams, when I first started, were a little bit wary of what I did because they didn't fully understand what sports psychology was, which is common. It was common back then. So I said, can I do some deep relaxation and guided imagery with these guys? And they're like, what do you want to do? I'm like, it's how to get them to relax. I'm like, okay. So I convinced the trainers, Reggie, if you remember, Reggie Scott.
Yeah.
So I convinced Reggie, okay, this is nothing crazy. It's not going to hurt them. So we had the guys come into the indoor field, laid them all down on the grass over the indoor field. So give you to lay down. And I put them through guided imagery and then deep breathing, muscle tension, relaxation. And so here are all 53 guys just stretched out in the turf, and they're like 25 guys fell asleep.
Yeah.
They were out, completely out. They're snoring. Now we have to bring them back, right? So now I'm waking everybody up, just gentle tap on the shoulder or a gentle tap on the knee or something. As we're walking by, we're waking them up. And the guys sit up and I say, okay, what do you think? How was this? And one of the guys raises his hands and says, can we do this every day?
Yeah. Nice.
And everybody cracked up laughing.
Yeah.
The trainers cracked up laughing. Reggie's like, oh, this is good. It was really teaching these professional athletes that had never been structured into their routine. Like, no, recovery needs to be purposeful, and it's important.
Yeah. Because
otherwise we become injured. We overuse. We become tired. Mentally we might get just too much in our head. So recovery to me that experience was a really fun thing to do.
Yeah, and was that about 2010?
Yeah, right, 2010, 11.
Yeah.
And we're doing that. And then what we did, because the players liked it, we put it onto the team iPads.
Mm-hmm.
So now they could access the guided imagery or deep breathing, muscle tension, relaxation anytime they needed or wanted. And then they also created a room, 2 rooms actually, for that you could go in and close the doors. It was, like this. It had sound pads in it. It was quiet.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know who's going to listen to this and how far out in the future it will be listened to, but I think they will hear that the year 2010, you were blowing people's minds with the importance of recovery, and they will laugh.
Yeah, they'll laugh, right. And now it is, it's talked about a lot, which is a really good thing. So we've really now advanced to the point where teams are focusing on, okay, it's mandatory to come in and do something in the training room, or we have a quiet room. So before the athlete, let's say you're a professional or here, at Lindenwood, before you leave the training facility, you're doing something to actively let yourself transition from my sporting me to my collegiate me or my home person, so that we can integrate, but also slowed it all down again.
Yeah.
So that gives you're in full 5th gear, going as hard as you could at practice. Recover.
Done a similar thing here, and the first time I did it, when people fell asleep, the number of people that fell asleep, it's a little spooky.
Yeah, they're just out.
Just to think that they can go from working out, and 6 minutes later they're out. And yeah, it's but that's a great story.
And I'd also like to thank, on here, it's if who knows if they're listening, is a guy named Denton Stewart, who's a psychologist here in St. Louis. And Denton was a great help to me in my journey. And Denton was sitting in the St. Louis Cardinals dugout in the 70s. He was like this pioneer of the field, happened to be in St. Louis, and he was really a great help. And then Dr. Rick McGuire, who's at Zoo, was also a really great help to me. And I talked to him a lot. I was reaching out like you did at the time when you were growing, and I was like, how do I do this? How do I find these things? And he turned me on to some really cool programs at the University of Southern Maine, at Springfield College in Massachusetts, where they had these summer symposiums, and the USOC sports psychologists would come, and those were the presenters. So I got so much great stuff, from these guys. So I had to thank Dr. McGuire for that as well.
He was still, I think he was, I'm not sure where he's at now, but he was wrapping up his career, I think, and still in Missouri in 2012 when I was there.
Yeah.
And the strength staff, his office was just outside the weight room, and the strength staff did a great job of collaborating with him, and they would just hand his materials right over to the football team. So in the middle of summer training, they would maybe right before a lift, they would go into the big lecture hall, and they would give them these great fresh from Dr. McGuire little lessons on psychology and things like that. And so I get to see that applied, and it's pretty mind blowing just to think all that great material is just being hand fed to these 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds. So
they're getting from a guru, not even knowing he was a guru. He really was a guru, and they're getting just phenomenal content from him. These gems that you can go for. But along that journey, when you're fortunate enough to have athletes to play 14, 15 seasons in a league like in Major League Baseball, that's a highlight to me. It may not be a name that everybody knows, but wow, this is a player who made it 15 seasons in Major League Baseball. And also seeing somebody become World Series MVP. Yeah. It's wow, what a great experience to be able to be part of a tiny part of that journey for somebody.
Yeah.
And help them, grow to their full potential.
Yeah.
In the sport. So, but I loved all my athletes. All my Division 1, 2, and 3ers. Into NAIers. They're great. Workers, athletes. It's been a really fun journey.
You mentioned some of the younger. Well, when you see some of those younger athletes, maybe are they still in grade school sometimes?
Oh yes.
Do you address more techniques and strategies for sport performance, or are you addressing more for holistic health?
So in that age group, for me, it's more holistic, and it's also about the parents.
Yeah.
So what I'm also trying to do is, if somebody's a really athletic family, what's the best way to guide that child, into sport, and how to coach them, and how should they look at winning, losing, or not having a good game or having a bad day, because if you go back to the beginning of sports psychology, one of the ideas that came about in this idea of flow, or being in the groove, or whatever you want to call it, is that an athlete, as they went into what they did as a kid, they fell in love with that sport. That's what the motivation. They had to have fun. It had to be fun. It had to be goofy and fun and silly, and then they fell in love with it, and that provided that motivation to want to keep doing it, and also wanted to keep growing at it. You now have that drive built in, because you just love this stuff. So I talk to parents a lot about find something they love, don't push it on them. I had a parent who was a professional baseball player, and he wanted his daughter to be. She liked softball, but he wanted to he was really pushing softball. All these personal coaches and all this stuff. I'm like, wait, can we just take this back about 5 degrees and just focus on enjoying it? He did, naturally learned how to enjoy it, but she needed to have her own journey and process as well. So at that age group, we'll work a little bit on things, performance, but it's more about that whole child. One of the notes I had for our talk today was also later in the talk, but it's about things for parents. And one of those things for parents has been, for me for years, is when the game is over, we don't start nitpicking and going through everything that happened in the game or the match or whatever it might have been. It's ask them a couple questions. Did you have fun today? Is there anything I can help with or do for you? And let's go home and eat, and we're done.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing because a lot of parents are so invested now in athletics because it's become big business, which is good for me because my business, but I recognize that we shifted from a much more kind of just recreational world of sport to now we have huge sporting clubs, and a lot of them are very successful, but they're also very expensive and they're time consuming and I like them, but what can we do to really have happy kids and healthy kids participating in sport?
Sure.
So that, as parents, that we don't overdo it to them. Because if I have somebody call me and they say, well, my son's 6 years old and he's going to be the next Tiger Woods. I'm like, I don't think I'm your guy. And I'll tell them why I'm not your guy. Because I'm not going to that doesn't work for me as a sports psychologist. I don't think it's healthy.
Sure.
I said, and I'll say, I'd work with you if we can talk about progression and, fun and enjoyment and what's going to make this maybe a better journey for both of you. But when they hear that from me, that person usually hangs up. Because it wasn't what they thought they were going to get.
Yeah. And with a clear head, I would say, all those things, but I know that I've got the kids at home, and when they start doing things, it's so exciting to see them get excited. But then part of me also sometimes I get a little bit more excited than they are. I'm don't be that guy, don't be that dad. So it's hard not to put pressure on them sometimes, but at the same time, when they are excited, it's a blast to see them have fun.
Yeah, when you see them really excited, and they had a good day on the field or a good day on the turf or whatever it might be, and they're having fun, and that's that love piece of finding what they love. So I think that that's a big thing, really important piece for parents, and also don't over critique with them, because really, particularly that we go back to research. So let's look at good research in the field of sports psychology. Well, one of the things we know when we survey athletes about the car ride home, they'll all say that's the worst experience.
Oh, yeah.
Over and over in research. So we got to pay attention to that. So the car ride is not a great place to let's review the whole game or match or whatever it was. It's like, no, did you have fun today? Is there anything I can do for you or help you with? Okay, let's go eat.
Oh, nice.
And let it be.
Yeah.
And let them come to you about, well, Dad, I didn't feel like I did so well in that third part of the third quarter or second half of the soccer match. I couldn't focus. Let them come, and then we can engage with what they're experiencing, because they've got to have their experience and their understanding of what they're doing as that young athlete on the field. If that makes sense.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. It's and I'm very early in the start of being a sports parent. But gosh, it's tempting to just get your hands dirty and to motivate. But I hear you, and I'll be a listener.
Yeah.
Can you talk about maybe a few issues that are restricting performance? Whether maybe it's that youth athlete, maybe it's our pros. I work predominantly with collegiate athletes, and I have a feeling that this will be a episode that I share with them to help them better understand some things and maybe improve their performance, or at least make them happier. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll try to make them happier. Exactly.
I don't know what direction we're going, but
They keep them happy with coach, right?
yes,
So,
there you go.
Yeah. So when we talk about, I think performance issues, there are a number, but I think to me there are three core solid issues that I want every athlete to have awareness of these, and also have good skills for how to, be in the zone, how to find flow, how to really enjoy what they do. And one is lack of personal awareness. So when you look at a great athlete, be it in NBA, swimming, NFL, Major League Baseball, hockey, whatever it might be, soccer, when you look at a great athlete, they have really strong self-awareness. They know themselves very, very well. And they have a confidence that is generally robust. it's hard to break down their confidence. So, and I think this is important because when we're not self-aware, what can happen is we're no longer synchronized. When we play and perform our best, our mind and our emotions and our body are all synchronized together. It's when we feel our best. We have that ability to play really, really well. So I want to have good personal awareness of how am I feeling in this moment. Can I check in with myself? Where's my brain? Where's my emotions? Are my emotions starting to turn on me? Is my thinking starting to turn on me? So I need to have or possess decent awareness, which is really simple. Like I use a really simple handout with the analogies of green, yellow, and red. And I call it Know Your Zones. And the green zone is life is good. My head's clear, my emotions are good, I feel happy, my body feels nice and loose and relaxed in me. And then we have the yellow zone, and the yellow zone is where I notice something started to turn or shift. So it could be that I got a little mad at myself or one of my teammates in this last play or this last quarter. It could be that I'm worried about making a mistake like I did at a previous game or match. Something's changed in their own psyche, in their own emotions, their own thought. And so when that happens, that would be the yellow zone. So I've noticed it's shifting, but I haven't melted down. Then we have the red zone. The red zone is where somebody kind of melts down. Their brain locks up on them. Their body or their emotional state gets tight. And then also the body, because the body hears everything we think and everything that you emote. You cannot lie to your body. It's physically impossible. The body goes, oh, we're all tightened up there. So the muscles tighten up. Now we're physiologically different than when we started the game. So we need to also have that, so that personal awareness is so important. So the green, yellow, red is a check-in. It's just asking yourself in less than 3 seconds, am I green, yellow, or red? Where am I? So it's allowing that athlete to check in with themselves regularly and easily so they have an awareness of where they are. Oh, so now I know where I'm at. If you say green, great, go have fun. If you say yellow, it's like, what just tripped you up? Are you thinking too hard in your head? Are you thinking ahead in the match? Are you worried about what happened last week? Can you let go of it? Or if you're in the red zone, maybe it's time to signal you need to come off the field, or you've got to do a release. We'll talk about that in a minute, what to do in real time to release some of that oomph you've got going on. So that's, I think, when you have good personal awareness, that's number one. Number two is, do you have good focus control, which is related to that. In focus control, what happens is at times athletes, we can get ahead and start thinking, ahead in a game or a match or a race. And so even though our body's here in the present moment, our head's going ahead forward. It's leaving the present moment. And now we're disconnecting from ourselves. That's one aspect of focus. Another is when we start dwelling on the past. So if you have a couple bad experiences, or you're having a rough time this season, you might start thinking like all the what ifs, like what if this happens? What if this happens? You think, what if I mess up again? Is coach going to pull me? Am I going to sit out the rest of the game? So the worry engine fires up. So that can pull focus as well. So when we have those occurrences, that same thing, check in with yourself. Where are you, green, yellow, or red? So if your focus is drifting either forward or backward, generally that's going to be not helpful because it's going to take you out of being here in the present moment now. There are some athletes, they're usually exceptional, who can think forward. And actually what's interesting about them, they're not logically thinking, but they possess the ability to see the field unfold, or they can feel energy change. Like you talk about Jokic, out in Denver with the Nuggets. He has an incredible ability to see, kind of like Kobe Bryant did, what was happening in real time, and he could predict where the play is going to go. Okay. It's like Michael Jordan in his heyday. Jordan could come down the court, and he already knew where some defenders were going to go before they even went there. So that's unusual. That kind of forward thinking, if you have it, maybe run with it.
Yeah.
But for us mere mortals, it's like, okay, wait a minute. If I'm going off in the future, I need to reel myself back into here. So that's that focus control. So again, we want to check in so I know where I am. Right? So with both, that self-awareness and the focus control, it's also, okay, talk yourself down a little bit. Or we're going to use some what we call, performance cues. Wait a minute, I got this. I'm starting because I'm good. I earned it. I'm the toughest. I'm the fastest person out here. So if you can remind yourself of a strength or two when you're out there, that helps us stay in the moment. It helps us stay, more self-aware. Yadier Molina, who's spent so many years as a catcher for the Cardinals, when he was behind the plate, was not doubting himself. He was a natural sports psychologist. And if he saw something happening with his pitchers or with the first baseman, the second baseman, he'd walk himself out to the mound. He didn't look for the dugout. He knew it was his job. That's what he would do. He would walk out and say, "What's going on?
Yeah.
What's happening? You doing okay? Anything I can do for you? Okay, breathe. We'll get your change-up workout. Don't worry about it. We're going to throw these 2 pitches or these 3 pitches next. Don't worry about it. First base got you." And he'd walk back to the mound, and the game would go again. So he would see it in his players, so they got outside direction. So depending on your sports, if I picked on soccer, you're not going to get that outside direction a lot. Maybe coach yelling at you or something. But so we want to check in, have some what we call performance strength cues, which is little 1 or 2 word phrases you like about you, how you play, what you're good at. I'm fast, I'm strong, I'm tougher than anybody else out here. I love this stuff. And also, most kids, by the time you're in high school, you've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours on a field. You know what you're doing. I got this. Those kind of cues are great for both focus as our personal awareness. The third major issue I see in almost every athlete, unless they've had training in it previously, is breath and body control. So our breath and body control is key to self-regulation, not only as an athlete, but as a human being. And everybody needs this skill. So I want to teach it to everybody. And I think we have a handout in one of the things we can put in the liner notes about that. But I want to explain what it really is. So breath and body control is that you can use your own breath, which regulates your body. It's going to regulate your heart rate, your breathing rate is going to control things. Your whole physiological response of your entire body system, you can slow it down, you can speed it up. But for most of my athletes who tend to lock up at times or have a bad day or get stuck, we want to work on relaxing the body. And that would be the idea of like you can sit in anywhere that's a comfortable space for you, where no one's going to bother you for about 10 minutes. And all I want you to do in that process is begin to take 5 easy, deep breaths in a row. Nothing gigantic, just nice, easy, deep breaths. 5 in a row. All the way in. You're full, and it's all the way out. So we do that 5 times in a row. Then we want to tense muscle groups and relax them. And when we tense them, we're not trying to tense super hard. We want to hurt anything in our body or damage anything. So we're just some light tension. And if you're laying down, a really easy thing to do is just gently push your head into the pillow or cushion. Just very gently. Count to 1, 2, 3, 4, let go. And right away, you may notice that, my neck feels a little looser. And then what we want to do is just take our shoulders and roll them up towards our ears. 1, 2, 3, 4, let go. And wiggle them. Because shoulders are a funny thing. You do the shoulders, you're like, oh yeah, that's better. You know right away. And then we do our jaw, because a lot of us hold stuff in our tension in our jaw. Same thing, just gently bite down, don't crack any teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4, let go. And then move the jaw around. You're like, oh yeah, that's better. Then we go to arms and hands together. So I might stick out my arms make a slight fist with both hands, and try to tense from my hands up to my shoulders. So tense them, 1, 2, 3, 4, let go. Again, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your hands a little bit, and you begin to feel this difference. So now that we got to arms, we want to stop for a moment, and we're going to do 5 deep breaths again. So we're doing this nice, easy, slow, deep breathing. 5 in, 5 out. Then we're going to work on the lower half of the body. The lower half of the body is very easy. If you're laying down or sitting in a comfortable chair, we're going to do like a crunch or half a crunch. We're just going to lean our body up like we're doing half a sit-up. Hold it for that count to 1, 2, 3, 4, let go. And kind of roll your core a little bit. And as we're laying down or sitting down, the next thing is going to be lifting up our legs. So it's kind of lifting our legs just off the ground a little bit. You'll feel that tension in your quads, a little bit in your glutes. And then just do that 4 count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, let them down. Then, lastly, you can do this easier with your shoes off than your shoes on, is we're going to take and pull our toes in as hard as we can. Not as hard as we can, but kind of hard. Tighten them up. And again, same thing again, that count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, let go. And now we're at the bottom of the body. 5 more of those easy, slow, deep breaths. And that's a skill I want my athletes to do every single day.
When is the best time to execute that?
And that can be where it fits into your world. It's a great thing to do after practice, but it also can be, for a lot of athletes, a great thing to do before practice. So depending on where you are emotionally or in your thought process or your timing of your day, wherever you can sneak it in. But also, if you know you're somebody, maybe this season you're a sophomore or a junior and a little bit more worried about how team's going or what coach is thinking, maybe do that right before practice if you can, before you exit the classroom building and maybe there's not another class that comes rolling in. Spend 10 minutes just doing that in the classroom by yourself, and then let yourself transition to sport. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes and the faster your body responds to it. It's amazing how fast your body adapts to it. So and that's to me why, so when I have focus control, I'm aware of what's happening in my body, my brain, my emotional process in real time. And I have breath control. I now can function really well as an athlete because I have these skills and I'm aware. I really know who I am in the moment. And that's a lot, because when we're teenagers, that's a lot of times hard to know because our emotions are kind of flying all over the place, and even as a young collegiate athlete at times, it's hard to know where we're at. So there are ways not only that help you in sport performance, but they help you in daily life. Those wellness tips, because, I'm just trying to make myself a better human being, and function as best I can.
Yeah.
And so those to me are those ways that we can really help with that, in terms of what we do as an athlete.
We've heard a little bit about some of the issues we've run into. What are maybe some strategies that we can employ to boost performance?
Yeah, so as we look at, boosting performance, I think, so we talked about breath work. That's to me, a must for every athlete to learn that skill, because once you learn it, the great thing about breath work is that it's portable, it's free, and it will go anywhere in the world with you at any time. So it's always there when you need it. The trick is to do it. I've only had one athlete ever tell me it didn't work. And I said, okay, how many days have you done it in the last 2 weeks? She's like, maybe 2 or 3. Like, okay. The assignment was every day for 2 weeks straight. So if you do it for 2 weeks straight, come back and tell me it doesn't work. Next time I see her, she's like, it works. So that's a really important one. I think one of the pieces to me also is we look at that idea of confidence, because confidence is really, it's a mental muscle, an emotional muscle that we all work as an athlete. And so the stronger and more resilient we can make our confidence, that's a really important piece of who we are as an athlete. And it can take us through a lot of stuff. It can really help. So A little simple exercise I like my athletes to do is what we talk about are confidence cues or performance cues. And what I like my athletes to do is just get out a piece of paper. No one's going to grade this thing, so don't worry about A's, B's, C's, D's. There's no grades. It's just you. What I want you to do is brainstorm everything that you like about yourself or that you think you do well. And if it pops into your head, there's no editing. You just write it down. Okay? We don't scratch out stuff. Just the thought comes into your head, write it down. Then, if you feel comfortable enough with a coach, ask them to add to it. Or with a parent, ask them to add to it. Or a teammate that you really like, ask them to add to it. Because at times, other people see strengths in us that we don't quite yet see in ourselves. But they'll let you know what they see. So now we have this list or lists that other people maybe helped you add it to. So now we want to take the list and get a stack of index cards. So this is old school because I like it this way.
Yeah.
So you have some index cards and a pen. And what I want you to do is
for my college athletes, index cards they're about the size of your cell phone and they're made of paper.
Right, they're made of paper. So we're going way back. But these index cards, you buy them at the store, the bookshop. So we start at the top of that list that you have. On the first index card, you write the first 3 strengths that are there. That one gets turned over. Then you take the next 3 strengths. That goes on the second card. And the third card. So we're writing 3 at a time on each card. And so you've exhausted every one that's on your big list is now in a stack of index cards. So now you have this stack of cards. And what I want you to do is put it somewhere that you're going to see before you leave your dorm room, before you leave your apartment, before you leave to go to work. So put the stack somewhere like next to a bowl of cereal or the kitchen counter or the front door, somewhere that you're going to see it every single morning. So before you leave the structure that is your home, take the one on the top. And so this, I'm making this one up. I'm a really smart person. I work really hard. I'm fast. So now as you go through the day, this is your job, and it's really easy. Every half hour, I just want you to say those 3 things out loud to yourself. Every half hour. If you're in the middle of class, I understand we can roll till the class gets out, right? But I'd like you to do that every half hour throughout the day. You get home, that card that we're using for today goes to the bottom of the stack. Next day you get up, take the next card. We're going to do the same thing. And depending on how many strengths that you started out with, you might have 20, you could have 30 in your stack. The number doesn't matter. As you're going through the stack, though, what's going to happen is you're going to bump into ones that you really like. Oh, that's a cool one. We really like that one. And what we're going to do then, after we've been through the entire stack, is write what I call a favorites card. And the favorites card has no minimum or maximum number, but I usually think somewhere between 1 and 10 is a pretty decent number. Once you get over 10, it's a lot. But if you really like it, write it down. So that card, our favorites card, is our game day card. And what I like my athletes to do with that card is on game day, I want you to pick 3. So as I go to game day today, or my swim meet today, what are my favorite 3 about me as a person, human being, athlete? And that's what we're going to say every half hour during the meet. And I know swim meets can get really long at times, and you need a lot of distraction at times, some good music and things to put on your headphones. But I want you saying those things to yourself as you're going through that meet, particularly as you're getting towards staging. You're getting off the bleachers, you're getting down to staging, you're getting through, line up to get into your races. Okay, we're going to be saying those things repeatedly because that's who you really are. The person on that card is you. That's the true you, the real you. The dominant you, that hardworking you who gets up and puts their butt in the pool at 6 a.m. in the morning. That's you. Or you're in the weight room at 6 in the morning. That's the real you. You work hard. And I want you to know that, feel that as you start. And that's a really fun one to do because you get to shape it any way you want. And it's a great way to help with performance. And athletes do get negative because it happens to pretty much everybody. At some point in time, you're going to get unhappy with yourself or your performance. So I have this, we have a handout for it as well. I call it thought-changing exercises. And it goes back to basically how we think. So human beings as a species think in patterns. And we tend to have a lot of repetitive thoughts that are the same. And when researchers go and try to count them, it's pretty wildly how far it varies. So some people will say there's 60,000, thoughts in a day, and a third of those are repetitive. And then there's other people say, well, it's only like a tenth of them are repetitive. But a tenth, if you had 40,000 thoughts in a day, there's still a lot of thoughts that are repetitive. So if they're negative, that's going to start to really affect us. So if we discount ourselves and say, I'm not really that good, or I'm not doing that well, in the semester, I'm kind of, I'm not that smart, or nobody likes me these days, or coach is really mad at me. If I'm thinking about myself in a negative way, that impacts our entire physiology from head to toe. So it also seeps into our neurobiology, because it starts to repeat up here. And we don't want it. We didn't plan. We're not laying in bed going, I want to think about myself negatively today. Nobody ever had that thought. It doesn't work that way. Sure. But it happens. But it also then affects our biology. It's going to affect how we feel in the weight room. It's going to affect how we feel on the field today. It's going to affect how we are in the pool. So we want to be aware of that. And when we have those negative thoughts, they tend to have these patterns. And so I give them goofy names on this little handout. And so one is called the blaming ant, which is, it's all somebody else's fault. It's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault is doing this to me. And it's kind of like I'm the victim. Or I have what I call the guilt ant. It's a negative thought where it is, woe is me, I don't deserve anything good, I'm not a good person, I don't deserve to be successful. I'm kind of like discounting myself. Then I have what I call the awfulizing ant, and I didn't describe what ant means. Ant means automatic negative thought. So when I use the word ant, that means automatic negative thought, because if you have a negative thought pattern, they do become automatic in our thinking, and we don't want that. So the awfulizing ant is one, we just start to think everything is going to be wrong. It's like, it's going to rain today, I'm probably going to flunk that quiz, it's like, I'm not going to do well in practice. Like, again, I have a very, kind of gloomy outlook of how my day is going to be. We want to catch that. So then we also have what I call fortune telling. Fortune telling is, it's where I go off into the future. What if I don't do well? I'm probably not going to get picked for a team, or I probably won't start this game. We're, again, discounting ourselves, but in a slightly different way. Then we also have people that we call, what I call is self-doubt and avoidance, where, it's not that they're thinking deep negative thoughts, but they're just kind of really backing away from who they are. It's like, people are better than me, I don't really give my all, so-and-so is like, they're killing it, I can't do that. So they, again, discount, doubt who they are, what their abilities are. So these different negative thoughts come up. So what we're going to do is know them, because everybody has a favorite or two. So the point of the list and the description is you to look at those and read those and see, does any of that sound familiar? And if it does, I want you to highlight that one, or that two, or that three, because sometimes we have a couple. So the important thing is to highlight them so that we know. This goes back to when in the beginning we were talking about awareness. If I have those negative thought patterns, I need to know that because it's hurting me. It's pulling me in the wrong direction. So now I know how I trick myself. Because when we think negatively, we are tricking ourselves. Right? It's like, yes. We're not in our own good space. So now I know how I'm tricking myself. And now, remember that strength card thing we did? We talked about it just a minute ago. We've got to use those strengths to counter when your negative thought process kicks in. It's like, hey, that's not me. That is not the real me. The real me is strong. The real me is fast. The real me is tenacious. The real me is unbreakable, unbeatable. I'm an internal optimist. Whatever it might be on your cards. But we want to use that in conjunction to know, we use our negative thoughts and use those cues, the positive cues, to counter that stuff in real time. And this takes a little while to really kind of get your groove with, because our thought patterns a lot of times happen subconsciously. We're not fully aware that we actually activated them. So the more, though, we do this and the more that we practice it, the more, second nature, so to speak, it becomes.
Yeah.
And you'll feel that change, you'll see that change. And that, for me, I think for a lot of athletes, particularly young athletes, when you're in really tough, sports, if you're doing gymnastics, you're doing figure skating, you're doing, soccer, you're doing swimming, because you're underwater, you can't talk to your teammates half the time when you're at swim practice. It's not like being at soccer where you can talk to your friends while you're doing drills. If you're a wrestler, wrestlers, yikes, you guys work hard. I've always been amazed how hard wrestlers work. It's like, so whatever your sport is, this can help you shift, again, that mental you into being a better you. And not only, again, as an athlete, as a human being. It's going to help you grow further and extend yourself. And that's what we want for you, better performance, but also an overall better you. If that makes sense in that process.
It's not an original quote, but somebody said that the neurons that fire together, they wire together.
Yes.
So the more you're thinking a thought, the stronger it is, and the easier it is to be repetitive. And I came across that saying a while back, and it just pops in my head every once in a while. I think.
Exactly, and when it imprints, that's what we don't think about, is we're imprinting this mental, emotional space feeling together in our body. We're imprinting it into our physiology. We don't want to do that. We do it by accident. So none of this stuff is on purpose. I always say, no one's ever woken up and said, let's just have a really crappy day. It doesn't happen, right? It's like, no, we all want good days. So that's another way to help kind of create better days for ourselves.
I think that aligns with what a lot of us are looking for, and it's a big part of what I'm trying to do with this. So that's great. That's something I'll be sharing quite a bit of. And hey, if you're listening, make sure you look, whether it's on YouTube or on Spotify, these handouts that he is describing, I will put in links to them so you guys can access them. He is sharing all the good stuff, so we're not holding out on it. So just look for those links. Look for those links associated with this audio. And then can we move on to, okay, you've had some years working, since 89, so 35 years, pardon me.
It's been a long time.
About, what are some of the new issues that you're seeing? The world is a rapidly changing place. What are some of the new issues that you're dealing with, and what should we watch out for?
Yeah, I think, new issues, they're not super new, but they're somewhat new, to the world of sports psychology. I think one is that focus on recovery, purposeful recovery after workouts, so that you, as an athlete, are creating a time and a space for you to recover fully, like really slow down the system, be it breathing, be it, cryo, be it hopping in the cold pool, we're really looking at how do you let your body physiologically and then both also emotionally, mentally recover. So I think that's a really big piece of things these days, because now, when the cryo came into, when LeBron James brought the cryo machine into the locker room, players were like, "Ooh, this is like, what is this thing?" But there's a lot of good research on it now that is a great thing that we need to do to really take care of our bodies. Back in working at the Rams, I would laugh because guys would get in the cold pool, and they, the rookies would laugh at the old guy. Guys who are only 3 years in the league, but they call them the old guys. Like, what are you doing there, old man? They're like, just wait, 2 years from now, you're going to be sitting here next to me, because your body can't take that abuse. It's a lot of abuse, and we've got to help it recover. So we want to do that. I think also some great things are meditation and mindfulness. And I know when I mention the word meditation, most people go, I can't do that. All right, this never worked for me. And meditation doesn't have to be something that you sit and do for an hour a day. If you can, great, but most people can't do that. So when I think about my athletes in meditation, what I think about is what I call mini meditation. And in the field of meditation, there's a type of meditation called JAPPA, which is JAPPA. And JAPPA meditation is very short. And how it works, it's really simple. And it's easier to do if you close your eyes. So if you close your eyes and you think about something on, you have your left side field of vision, and you have your right side field of vision, but your eyes are closed. So you think about a word you could use on your left side of your field of vision. And then think about a word that's sitting now on your right side of your field of vision. And I want you to say the word on the left. And let your vision then slowly drift over to the right. And then say that word on the right. And let your vision again slowly drift back towards the left. And now let it drift again towards the right. Back over to that second word. And now, as we're floating back towards the left, I want you to let your brain just stop in the middle where there's nothing. And just see how long you can float in nothing. So that was 20 seconds. So this is really simple to do. It doesn't have to be words on the left or right. It could be a picture that you see if you're a visual person, see an image.
Yeah.
What it does, it just provides you an anchor on each side, left and right, to see where the blank space is, where the nothing is. And what's interesting about people that can do even 5 to 10 minutes of meditation a day, there's great research of just looking at how it helps us with our mood, how it helps us with our thought process. It helps us that we again, it's this recovery piece too. We're slowing things down. We're letting our body fully connect mind, emotion, spirit, physical body, so that everything is aligned as best we can. So I think, meditation or mindfulness, there's a lot of great stuff on mindfulness. Also doing mindfulness work, if it's journaling, if it's, repeating some mantras during the day, if it's remembering to breathe. But interweaving these pieces into your day as an athlete is going to help you not only as an athlete again get better, but also as a human being get better.
Yeah.
And I think the last one in new stuff is the advent of AI. AI is going to change everything. So it's taken the field of sports psychology a good 20, 25 years to really get to the full steam it is now.
Mm-hmm.
We're at a full steam maximum velocity. We have, there's hardly any collegiate teams anymore that don't have some kind of consultant or have somebody in-house full-time.
Yeah.
Or multiple people. If you're NCAA Division I, you have multiple.
Yeah.
But AI is now here, and AI, good and bad, AI also can provide us with a lot of content about sports psychology. So I think the AI is there. Can we pair it then with our coaches and what they know, with our trainers, and the work that trainers do, with our, conditioning coaches, that help us, develop our workout, programs, so that we coordinate what we can find on our own with our team. And your team is your team doc, it's your trainers, it's your conditioning coaches, it's everybody, So who can you pull in and bounce ideas off of? And if you're having, a rough period as an athlete, let somebody know. When I started out in this business, if you came to me as an athlete, by a college coach or a professional team, the first thing they'd ask me, does coach think I'm crazy?
Yeah.
That was the first question. I'm like, no, you're not crazy. Like, why would you think that? Well, there's got to be something wrong with me. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're human. But that was the thought process back then, that, wait a minute, there's something wrong with me. Or are they trying to get rid of me? I'm like, no, actually, they're trying to help you get better so that you stay longer.
Yeah.
But it was hard at that era, 20 some years ago or more than that, to understand that, because sports psychology wasn't a mainstream thing. And now it is, and now athletes are comfortable online talking about, or LinkedIn, or on their own YouTube channel, talking about having difficulties with, depression, anxiety, or coaching issues, or just self-view. So what's great about it to me now is that, wow, we can talk about this stuff openly. It's so amazing to me, and that's where tap your resources, be it your college counseling office, somebody in the athletic departments you really like, somebody on your dorm floor, tap your resources, because as an athlete, particularly as a collegiate athlete, high school athlete, student, you're double dipping. You consume a lot of energy, more so than somebody who just goes to school. You're putting a lot of your energy out. We've got to have good recovery, and we want to have good resources that keep you balanced, to help keep you afloat.
Yeah, it's I was surprised that statistically your college athletes will have more mental health issues than the general student body. I thought you're physically active, you have a built-in social system, social network, and so you'd be a little bit healthier and safer, but they're spread so thin.
They're spread so thin, and I think also in this era, like went back to that we talked about the business of sports getting bigger, is that if you're a college athlete, that's a really valued position. It's got high value to everybody who looks at you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the college athletes will say they feel a lot of pressure. They feel a lot of pressure to perform well, to stay healthy, to not get injured, to have good grades. There's a lot of blocks, so to speak, they're stacking on their shoulders. So I think, particularly as a collegiate athlete, okay, let's have, who's my resource team? Can you pick out, you don't need 10. If you got 10, great. But if you have 2 or 3 people you can trust and you can talk about anything with, that's really important. And if you can't find somebody on your dorm floor, on your team, please try out your college counseling office. Those folks who do that work have been there a long time. They know what they're doing. They know what college is like. They understand the process. And also look up sports psychologists. There's a lot more of us. Back in the day in 1996 when I started, 95, 96 when I started, I was the only active sports psychologist in a town of 1.1 million people.
Yeah.
One. And that's because the 2 guys I knew retired.
Yeah.
So now we have a lot in town. So if you need to seek out those resources, there's a lot of really good young folks in town who are doing good work. You are very psychologically minded as a coach. Tap those resources so you stay healthy as an athlete. To me, it's really important. AI will help with that because we can tap it faster, right?
Yeah, when I think about and we're trying to create the high performance model where there's the trainers and the coaches and maybe the sports scientists. When you mentioned AI, maybe simplifying the communication that needs to be had, because to have everybody weigh in on one athlete and then move on to the next one for a team of anywhere from 20 to 100 athletes, it's very time consuming. So to be able to have each source put in their info, and if something could speed that up, that would play a big role. That would be pretty useful. Not to mention the athlete will have all their input and things like that. So.
And it makes me think back to my World Series MVP. Great baseball player, incredible baseball player, incredible worker, unbelievably talented. He doubted himself.
Yeah.
Because everybody in baseball, you play 180 plus games a season. It is a grueling season. It's long. And if you make the playoffs, we got more games. Now we're into the NLCS, like here in St. Louis, or now we're in the World Series. Your body is literally wrung out. And so they'll have slumps. Everybody has slumps in baseball as hitters. And one of the fun things that we figured out one time, I asked him about what it was like when he was little, to hit. He's like, "Oh, it was so much fun." I'm like, "Why?" He told me why this whole process was like. He could remember the ball always going out over the fence, the chain link fencing that was like 4 feet high.
Yeah.
And we figured out this great groove about how to visualize being that. Because being that, he could remember that feeling. And it got him out of his head. And then the slump would go away. But even, during the season, we might have to touch base a couple times because, that happens, you get in slumps. Same things with a player who was a defensive player of the NFL. Defensive player of the year in the NFL. Mm-hmm. He wasn't all perfect. He wasn't nonstop confident every game. He was an animal. He was strong, he was smart, he watched more film than probably anybody. because one of the coaches turned him on to, like, if you want to be the best you can, watch all the film you can. And he did.
Okay.
He did. But he still had times he doubted his training. He doubted, am I really doing okay? Because his standard, his bar was so high for himself, incredibly high. And he did it multiple times, multiple. But again, so these professional athletes and world-class athletes and Olympic athletes, they're not perfect. They're not machines. They have the same struggles that everybody does. It's just they're better at bouncing back from them. So they use the same tools. They just get more resilient quicker. So I think as you as an athlete, as your teams and clubs here at Lindenwood is use tools as much as you can. There's tons of great sports psychology books out there now that are fast reads. Check them out. If you have time, it's off, the semester's ended or it's summer, fill your tank with some of that because that's going to really help you come next season, next year, best you can be.
Yeah. And we talked about a couple of those earlier, so if you're listening, check out the screen now, and I'll put up a couple of photos of those, so we'll have those available for you to check out and investigate. Moving on a little bit, what can we do to prevent the modern age from ruining our athletes or our children?
That stuff.
Yeah.
The modern age. I think, again, it goes back to, sports has become big business. And really, truly, we want our kids to fall in love with sports. That's the best thing that can happen. So it's not pressure. It's not tons of practices. It's enjoy what you do. And I think because we have a lot of sporting clubs now is really check out your sporting clubs. So before you commit to them, read really how they describe themselves. Talk to parents about how their coach, or how do they train their coaches? What kind of training do they expect their coaches to have? Talk to parents about what's been their experience before you sign on the dotted line. Because if you're going to a club, that can be a very time-consuming, also expensive experience. So really check it out. Really research it well. I think that will help. Another thing to me is that a lot of times as we get into that, early middle school, early high school age, in America, our kids start specializing in sport really early, meaning we pick one sport. We're just doing that one. And if you go back to research, what we know, or what we find in sports psychology research is that athletes that have more than one sport tend to rate themselves of having more fun and also doing better. It's interesting because in Europe, they've had sporting clubs for years, but how it works in the European system is the club offers all different sports within the same club. So in the European system, you can switch from basketball to baseball or to soccer or to field hockey or whatever it might be. In our system, we're kind of just, we do baseball or we do basketball. So also if you can keep your kiddo and they want to play different sports, or have it 1 or 2 or 3 in a year, that can be a great thing because it keeps it fresh. It helps you change up your muscle groups. It kind of changes how you're patterning, your muscle patterning, your footwork and things work, your vision's working, which helps make you a better athlete. And I think it also helps keep it fresher. And then as that kiddo gets to, maybe sophomore year, that's a little bit late, I know, in St. Louis, but you start specializing then. But if we can keep them, I think, in multiple sports, that's really happy. To me, it is an important part of that as well. The other piece is to not dwell on athletic scholarships. What I see in a lot of my parents, my sport parents, is that they can get locked onto this idea that they're going to get a sporting scholarship, an athletic scholarship. And out there, statistically, there's 25 times more academic scholarships available than there are athletic. So this is what I say, because if you constantly start talking to your athlete about you're going to get a college scholarship, you're going to get this, it's pressure. It's a lot of pressure, and they already have a lot of blocks on their shoulders. They're trying to be a good athlete. They're working hard. They're trying to be a good student. So what I like my parents to actually really focus on is being a good student first. Because reason being, and this I'm not making up, if your child is being recruited, particularly at the collegiate level, the second question you're going to be asked as a parent or an athlete is, what are your grades? It's the number 2 question every time. And if you can say, I have a 3.5 GPA and I got a 27 or 28 on my ACT, you just upped your value because the coach now knows, or that assistant coach knows, you can make grades. Okay? You can make grades, and they're not going to have to worry about you making grades. They're like, oh, this is a good student. Cool. Not only is he a good hitter or a good swimmer, or she's a good soccer player, she's going to make grades and I don't have to worry about her.
That is, as a coach, it is a total heartbreaker when you've got a stud on the team who scores points, wins matches, does the big things, but they don't do their homework.
And they can't make grades. Yeah.
They don't make grades, and they're off the team. They're not competing. That's a heartbreaker.
And for parents, also, it's a heartbreaker for that athlete and that coach and the team as well. But also for parents, before you're in that process, think about it this way. If your student is a good student, they don't have to have straight A's, but good grades, and they're a good athlete, you can double dip. Not only could you be talking about a athletic scholarship or partial athletic, you can also get a partial or maybe decent-sized academic scholarship, which is going to get you more money usually than your athletic. Because what most parents also don't realize, when you get a collegiate scholarship, that is reviewed upon every year. It's not guaranteed that you get the same amount of money the next calendar year. And usually that amount of money goes down because they're trying to recruit new athletes to the program. So focus on academics, and also don't put so much pressure about getting an athletic scholarship. Because the more fun your players, your athletes having, the better they're going to play.
Awesome. And then can we kind of roll that into a more positive light? What are those parents and coaches who are doing it right? What are they doing to promote success? Promoting
success is, really, it goes back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, which is really the idea of have fun. Yeah. When athletes are surveyed, and this has been going, there's 25 years worth of surveys on this stuff and research. When athletes say, what do they want sports to be for them? It's about having fun. So the more fun you have, the better. So there's a gentleman, I'm going to find out where I put that. So Brad Stevens is the president of basketball operations for the Boston Celtics. He's been in basketball his whole life. He's a basketball guy. He's a coach. He coaches the Celtics. He's also the Little League coach for his son's Little League team, which is awesome. So when you think about it, and his mindset for his team is have fun. Let these kids play. Let them have fun. That is the primary importance. We touched on it earlier again, which is the car ride home. This is really simple. It is not the time to dissect what just happened in that match, game, whatever meet you were at. Okay? It's not the teachable moment. The teachable moment is the next day. And also the teachable moment, if it has to be, needs to be really short.
Yeah.
And in sports psychology, we have this funny thing we call it the sandwich. The sandwich means you give a positive compliment to your athlete. You tell them what the mistake was and how to fix it. That's the most important piece, how to fix it. And then you tell them something positive about them again. We call that the feedback sandwich. So positive, the critique, which is what you did, how to fix it, give them the fix, and then another positive. Boom.
Yeah.
That's what the best people do out there in the industry. I got to see, what's his name at North Carolina, not North Carolina, Duke basketball display. I got to go to his practice once. And it was amazing. So watching this practice, and when he would stop practice, he'd blow the whistle, and he'd look at the player and say, Bobby, what did you just do? That was the wrong move. And he'd hope the player would answer it. If the player didn't answer it, he'd look at somebody else on the court. And he'd say, okay, Sam, what did Bobby not do? Well, he turned left instead of right, and our play was rotating to the right, and that's where the ball should have gone. Exactly. Run it again. There was no screaming. There was no yelling. It was like, run it again. And so it was interesting. He did that for 90 minutes straight. The only time they stopped and they had to run laps once, it's because the ball went off the court. It bounced out of bounds. And then I went up later to one of the assistant coaches, asked, like, what was the deal with the out of bounds thing and running laps? He goes, well, in our league, we're so competitive. The basketball is so competitive. If we lose one loose ball, we can lose the game. He goes, and we don't make it to the NCAA tournament. He goes, we train our players that everyone dives for the ball every time.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I get it. That makes a lot of sense. But the reason I bring that up is that's how purposeful the coaching was. It wasn't random. It wasn't yelling, screaming. So this is this is Duke basketball. It is height. That's how purposeful he was in training his players. So also if you coach, we want to, and you're a parent, we want to be purposeful about what we think, what we say to our athlete. Your athlete's out there working hard. Let them know. Pump them up a little bit. Like tell them, hey, you know what? I know you put a lot of time in. Remember that. I'm proud of you. So that we also let them know we see what they're doing. The last one would be, I think, as your athlete gets a little bit older, if you go to a lot of practices or all the games and things, every once in a while let them go on their own. If it's appropriate and they're old enough, so that way they gain a little bit more independence. So they're walking themselves into practice and out of practice, or they're walking themselves into the game and out of the game. It doesn't have to be every time, but just every once in a while, just that they gain a little more independence as they age.
Yeah.
Is a good thing. It helps them feel, that way. Actually, lastly is on failure. Everybody's going to fail. We're all going to have a bad day. And so when we fail is really go back to this idea of you only control what you control, which is a funny saying. But what that means is you're only in control of you. So your job is to put forth your best effort every day, right? Understand your attitude, your emotions, and your thinking. So it goes back to the very foundations we started talking about in the beginning. Are you aware? Where's my focus? And am I loose? Am I ready? Am I ready to play? So, if you're working that with your young athlete, that's a great skill that you learn early because it'll build as they age. That they know, oh yeah, I just got to worry about me. I don't have to worry about all this stuff or what Bobby was doing over here or Susie's doing over there. It's like, oh yeah, I just got to do my job. And it also leads to better communication.
One of the reasons that had you on the brain, and I was really hoping that you would come on to the show here, is that I personally have about 100 athletes who could have let's say they have a question for you, is that unfortunately here at Linwood, we've had quite a few teams that have just been trimmed. We've been going through a lot of growth, and it's part of the next phase of just things happening around here, I guess. But I have quite a few athletes who their time here at Linwood is ending sooner than they thought it would. So we've had to trim some teams. If you were talking to those athletes in maybe like an auditorium, to a bunch of athletes who now have to end their career a little bit sooner or just shift and make big changes to a different university, some of them are attempting to shift sports. We'll see how that happens. Would you have any advice for them about kind of this new challenge that they're facing?
Oh boy, yeah, that's a really tough one. Because as a collegiate student athlete, you've made it a really long way. And being an athlete is a really, it's a core piece of your identity. So as we talk about, identity, in the world of sports, everybody has to transition out of sport at some time. Sometimes it happens because we were ready to transition, we wanted to retire. Other times it happens because of injury, which can be really difficult. But I think in the scenario we're talking about here, where teams are being cut and things are happening, first I'm really sorry to hear that's happening to these athletes because I know they've worked incredibly hard to get here. They've worked incredibly hard to be on a team, do what they do. They probably love what they do. And I have a lot of empathy for them, and sorry to hear that that's occurring. And I think transition is really challenging, and we've got a couple books as recommendations about the transition process. And one of them's a workbook, so it's kind of fun. You can you're reading along about these different parts of transitioning out of sport from active sport, and it has worksheet pages for you to write on. So it really helps you kind of clarify for yourself, what are you looking for, what do you want? And just like you were saying, I think there's going to be athletes who want to keep competing. And so if you have that energy and you have that mindset, and I know you're probably now on your own because you've got to really investigate, so to speak, getting everything put together, like, can you get released? Can you get permission to be transferred from a coach? You have to really seek out those other coaches actively. And that's a really time-consuming process. But if you're up for it and you really think you want to keep participating, go for it. It's just going to mean you get to fire out a lot of emails to assistant coaches and try to get yourself noticed, have some stuff up on, sports sites where they can see you, your performance, your stats. Also, your grades. If you're a good student, don't forget about those grades. Grades matter, man. If you have good grades, parade that. Because then they know, wow, this is an athlete who can make grades. We don't have to worry about them. That's a selling point. So that, I think, if you want to dive into that process, it's good. But I know that it may take you a significant amount of time because you've got to navigate, a lot of NCAA kind of regulations and rules and things. But if you really have your heart on it, go for it. But also allow you to be kind to yourself. It's going to take you probably a while to make those arrangements. So don't feel frustrated if a month later you haven't succeeded. It may take you 2, 3, 4 months to succeed. I had an athlete who did that this past year, but it took him a good 4 months to get everything done, and he was on top of it, but he did it quickly. That's 4 months is a pretty quick time to do that. But I think also if you're an athlete and you're kind of feeling defeated or you're feeling worn out, you're feeling tired, and you don't have that energy to start over, you can allow yourself the permission to transition. A lot of professional athletes don't transition until it's too late. Or like if I go back to Brett Favre, who was an old football player once upon a time, phenomenal quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. He retired, and then he went to the Vikings, and then he retired again. And then I forgot to, he went to the third time, and then he retired a third time. He stayed in way too long, and he actually hurt himself in the process. He hurt himself physically multiple times, and he also kind of hurt his reputation. He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time in the NFL, but it really hurt him in multiple ways. So I think if you're feeling in that space where you're not ready to take on that challenge to want to find a new team or a new school, or like where you are here at Lindenwood, allow yourself that permission to transition. It's like, okay, I'm going to be a student. I'm going to put a lot of energy into being a student the best I can. I'm going to want to crank up my grades and maybe direct myself towards a graduate degree. Or maybe I'm looking into getting a coaching credential and I want to coach, and do some of those kind of things. But I want you to really appreciate yourself. I want you to appreciate who you are and what you have accomplished. Because if you're here at Lindenwood as an athlete, you're a success. You've done a lot of hard work. You've gone through lots of games and meets and practices and, God knows how many thousands of hours at this point you've put into sport. Give yourself credit for that. Remember that, and be proud of it. Be proud of who you are and what you've done. You've accomplished double of what most college students have already done. You've doubled that, and that's important to remember. You are already successful. You've already made it. And I think also you can allow yourself time to step back, breathe, which just sounds silly, but during this process of when you're in transition and you don't even really know what's happening with teams, it can be really mentally frustrating. And this is where we want to really catch our thinking, that we're not, doing a lot of that negative thought stuff, those ants, those automatic negative thoughts I was talking about, those have a tendency to pop up in these times of stress. As an athlete, you learn to really work with stress, but usually in a competitive way. So in this scenario, you're not driving the bus, so to speak. It's the university is, and other universities and coaches are. So it's allow yourself to step back from it a little bit and see a little space between you, who you are as a human being, in the process. And that's what I mean by breathe, so you aren't really grinding it yourself or grinding over about the process. If you can do that, I think that helps. And then you have some time to kind of reset and say, what do I want to do with my non-sporting life? Or do I want to like look for a different sport? Do I want to pick up, golf, which I never played? I thought that looks kind of fun. And you might find a different love, a different sport. And if you can, that's great. Or be curious and just go try a few new things you haven't. But allow yourself time. And I know it's a really difficult time, emotionally and probably physically as well. But if you catch those negative thoughts like, oh yeah, that's the stuff Joe was talking about, don't bang on your own head. And step back, breathe for a moment, think about one of your strengths and see if you can brush off that negative thought. If you think about a duck, when they get into a pond, they get splashed by other ducks, they do this little funny wiggle thing with their wings. All the water brushes off. And human beings, we can do the same thing. So I didn't talk about it during performance, I should have. So we'll toss this in as a thing. So when you make a mistake on field or on court or somewhere in what you're doing as an athlete, particularly if we're in a sport where it moves at a quick pace, one of the things that can be really helpful is what we call a brush off. And that can mean literally taking your hand and brushing on something like you're brushing it off your knee onto the dirt. Or you're brushing it off, from your elbow down to your hand onto the ground. Like my baseball and softball, my softball players is really fun because there's a tempo that happens with those games where you have a moment to actually stop and do the brush off, like off your knee, off your hand, off your arm. And baseball is also fun because you're wearing cool shoes. And softball, you got those cleats on. And what I say is brush it off, squish it with your cleat. Now I've made this purposeful mental disposal of what that mistake was.
Yeah.
I'm getting rid of it in real time. I'm just dumping it. Boom. And you can do something, you can make it any motion you want. So it doesn't have to be just that way. You could say, well, I'm going to make a circle and throw it like imaginary. Whatever you come up with in your imagination is perfect. But we use it as a part of our routine when we play and perform so that we let ourselves click back into that full us, that aligned us as quickly as we possibly can. Like so in the NFL, I'd have my players, when they came off field, if they had made a mistake, right away we brush it off. We admit what it was, what's the fix. And if you couldn't figure out the fix, go find that assistant coach on the field because they're going to let you know what that fix is. But we used it actively there. So we can do the same thing here where if you're walking through your day and all of a sudden, the negative thoughts pop up about team and process here, it's like, okay, do that deliberate brush off as a means to help you let go of it in the moment now. So you don't drag it around with you the next 40 minutes into psychology or into biology or chem lab. It's not coming with you.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's, for the athletes who are out there, that's a really tough thing. And I have a lot of empathy for you.
And for my athletes or former athletes or soon-to-be former athletes, I hope that helped out, and I trust that it does. And to add to what he said, I miss you guys. Stay in touch.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then I like the physical action that goes along with that. So there's a few sayings about motion and emotions, but I guess they say motion creates emotion, and maybe in that case, motion controls emotion.
Or we can release emotion, right? We can release, that we allow ourselves that permission to release it, because a lot of athletes, we make that mistake and we hang on to it, like, we grab it, or it grabs us. And this is the opposite. It's like, okay, maybe it grabs you, but now I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm purposely getting rid of it. And no one's going to really notice, because they don't really notice you brushing something off your pads or off your arm or your hand, but nobody really, it doesn't seem strange.
Yeah, it's innocuous. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just doesn't really visually hit most people. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. That is great. That's everything and more that I was hoping for that you might have to share with us. And I know I'll be directing. I personally have 100 athletes, so I'm going to be directing towards what you just shared with us there. This is the Winning Wellness podcast, and with Winning Wellness, I kind of approach it with two different characteristics. And one is that some people are not well, and they need to win their wellness, and that those who are well enough to compete and they could be competing in organized sport, they could be competing at work, for promotion, they could just be competing and trying to achieve goals. So whatever they're competing for and they're trying to win, that they do that well. With Winning Wellness, do you have we've talked about so many great pieces of advice today. Is there anything else that you might share with people to help them win well?
Yeah, and hopefully these ideas, I think, will fit with that process on both ends, a little bit. As an American culture, we're really interesting because the way we kind of go at the world is different than a lot of other cultures in the world. Even our European counterparts were different. Even though we have, most of our origins come from there. So one of the things, like when I was thinking about wellness, is the idea of focusing on being versus doing. Now, as athletes, we do, because we're very directed in a sport. We have a very specific mission in a sport. But as a human being, in our wellness, can we focus more on being who we are versus doing to be who we are? And that sounds strange to a lot of people, but it also ties in with this idea of mindfulness and being present. And so it's, being more aware and mindful in your day of who you are and what you're doing and why maybe you're doing it. So in the process, there's this idea of being is like, just stop and breathe again for a minute. It's like, check in with yourself. How am I doing today? Am I doing all right? Is my head busy? Is my head calm? How's my internals here, my system? How does my body feel? So it's a check-in. Like, let me be. Am I being me? Did I say hi to somebody? Did I miss saying hi to one of my friends? Like, I got to check in with so-and-so today. I forgot to talk to them the other day. So we're more in being ourselves and who we are versus trying to accomplish a whole list of things. And sometimes we have that day where we have to accomplish a whole list of things, but also we can still be. We can stop for a minute here, or 30 seconds, or 5 minutes. And there's a couple of really good authors when it comes to talking about being mindful. And one is he's now deceased. He was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and his name was Thich Nhat Hanh. And he writes these very short, like 60-page books. And the pages are only this big. They're only this tall. They're really small books. So you can read one in probably 40 minutes, the whole thing. And if you just wanted to read, a page a day. But his lessons are really simple, very direct. He uses stories. So every lesson is a story. So they're fun to read. I always warn people, if you get one of his books, it was translated from Vietnamese into French and then from French into English. So occasionally the verbiage is a little funny, but the lessons are great. And they're really fast, easy reads. His stuff is just fun. There's a guy named Eckhart Tolle, and Eckhart Tolle is all over YouTube. So if you're onto YouTube, put in Eckhart Tolle's name, Tolle, and he'll pop right up. He is probably, besides the Dalai Lama, considered the second most recognized spiritual, and I use that in a very large sense of the word spiritual, teacher in the world. And he's got some great books. He has a lot of shorts on YouTube to that idea about being an identity and, getting really comfortable with who we are in our own skin. Because that's really important. As we go along and we're developing it, if you're a teenager, if you're a young college student, if you're a senior in college, you're going off to the work world, of being comfortable in our own skin, and liking who we are, appreciating who you are, that you can love you can be happy with you, and that can be hard for a lot of people. So Eckhart Tolle has some really great books as well. And then there's the Dalai Lama, who's also on YouTube. Cool. He's got some good shorts. He also has a book. It's called The Little Book of Wisdom. And so the reason I like The Little Book of Wisdom, it really is a little book. And so he has these very short, like 1-2 page, at the most 3 pages in his book it's like a square. It's very small. 3 pages at the longest lesson. And again, he uses a lot of stories to teach. It's how he teaches. And that's another great resource if you're really working in that part of I want to learn what being means. I want to really get comfortable being in my own skin. I want to get comfortable and really like who I am, all of who I am, and appreciate me as a human being. Because if we want to be well, we need to like ourselves. And that's really, really important. Like how we look, be okay with what we are physically, where we are emotionally, where we are mentally. That you are good. You are a good person. You are healthy. You are who you are. We can make peace with that. I think the other part of wellness, to me, that always strikes me is we were designed by nature to move. And so can we get out and move our body? And I know a lot of people struggle with wellness. They struggle with their diet. They struggle with weight. They struggle with movement. And even if it's getting out and doing a 5-minute walk in your neighborhood, 5 minutes, if that helps you with your goal, just get out and move your body a little bit, And can you do that again the next day? So for 1 week, can you walk 5 minutes once a day, every day, for 1 week? And write it down. If you do, write it down. I walked today. I walked my 5 minutes. I made it to, Joanne's house down around the corner, and back to my house. And then, can we maybe stretch it to 7 or 10 minutes the next week? So, and again, keep writing it down. So you have a little journal. You have, a little workbook that you're following your progress. So one of the things we know about exercise and getting better and healthier, people who write down in a book or even just could be a notepad, what they did each day are better at sticking with their goals and having more success with their goals. But move a little bit, because we were designed by Mother Nature and Father Sky, or whoever you want to call it, by our being, to move. And if we don't move, our body doesn't do well, because it wasn't designed that way to be stationary. So I think, for all of the listeners, if you can, and I know sometimes it can be really hard to take those first 3 or 4 steps because you haven't walked in a while. If you can safely do it, just get out for 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm very happy that you finished with that note. I think of all the questions and topics and things that I deal with now, especially with the general population, trying to convince them to do that. A little bit is impactful. You don't have to be an hour and a half at the CrossFit gym.
No, you don't have to run a marathon. Right.
I need all the help I can get in selling small little wellness period. A movement session.
Yeah.
There's such value in that, and people don't respect it. They don't respect the 10-minute walk, the 5-minute walk.
Well, and what's amazing, that 5-10 minute walk, once you start doing it, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you're going to feel different. Not only here, in the headspace, you're going to feel it in the body space. You're going to feel like a different person. And hopefully that helps you if you want to go to maybe 15 minutes. Maybe you find somebody in your neighborhood who wants to walk with you. Or maybe your spouse wants to walk with you. Yeah. Or somebody from work. So that, get out and move your body.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's a secret weapon you just gave us right at the end here. So thank you for that. Is there anything I have not asked you today that I should have? Is there anything else to bring up?
There's oodles, or maybe we'll do part 2 in a couple of weeks, a couple months.
Oh my gosh, that'd be amazing.
I'd love to do that with you.
Okay, awesome.
But if to connect with me, if they want, I'm on LinkedIn, so it's an easy way to connect with me on LinkedIn. They can also connect with me on my website, which is Winning Edge, and then it's sports with an S, psychology.com. So it's a very long URL. I apologize for it being that long, but it's Winning Edge Sports Psychology.com. And that has a lot of content, also has some articles for athletes and parents about performance. It has some articles about some confidence cues and things. It's got an article about tips for parents, which we also, I think, have the article for tip for parents for your liner notes as well. But thank you for letting me come and talk about sports psychology, something that I truly love. I appreciate from the university ability to get to do what I do. And I know that you do great work here, and thank you for doing the coaching, the training, the counseling and everything that you do for all your athletes here. I mean, you put out a tremendous amount of energy.
Thank you so much. And it's easy to see that you're passionate and love what you do. So that shows so much every time I talk to you, particularly today.
Well, thank you so much for
thank you.
being here today.
Thank you so much for listening to our Winning Wellness podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions for podcast guests or topics, you can submit those through YouTube comments. You can message me on Instagram. My handle is Mitch Schwartzman, or you can email me at coachmitchschwartzman@gmail.com.